I want to talk about a very important topic this tax season. How do you file business taxes with no income?
One in a million, one in a million, one in a million. You know they're coming up to me, cause I'm just the kind of flower with a stinging kind of beat, but the rhythm's getting higher. Go, 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 go. One in a million, one in a million, one in a million, one in a million, one in a million.
Welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. How are you today? I hope you're all doing fantastic. I'm doing marvelous if you were to ask me. If you are doing as great as I am, go grab a cup of coffee or tea or vodka and let's roll. In today's conversation, I want to speak specifically about paying how to file business taxes with no income. The thing is, you started a business, then let it sit for a while, right? If you didn't earn income for an entire year, you might be wondering if you have to file your tax return. So, how does filing taxes for a small business with no income work? To file or not to file? So that's the question we all must ask. And in today's conversation, luckily, I'm going to give you answers to that question. So before we start, let me give you an overview. There are legit reasons why you might not have income in a fiscal year. Not all businesses without income during a year are on their way to closing up shop. There are a number of reasons why a business might not incur income during a fiscal year. So here are 4 common scenarios that could result in no income. Scenario number 1, the go-getter that you are forms a business but waits to start operating. So some business owners put in the work to form and structure a business a year or more before operations actually begin, okay? So if this sounds more like you, this is totally fine, but you need to understand why. So if you formed your business and filed the paperwork with the state, I'm talking about limited liability company, for example, but wait to officially start, you may not have income during the year. So you need to understand the origin, the scenario number 1. Scenario number 2, the entrepreneur who you are, who starts multiple companies, then pauses one. So your brick and mortar business is doing great. So you decide to open a new, separate online business. Unfortunately, your marketing efforts fall flat, so it doesn't do very well. So you lose interest and put quote unquote a brief hiatus on it. So you hope to get back to it eventually, right? Eventually. So weeks turn into months, and before you know it, you have gone a fiscal year without incurring income. So if this scenario sounds like you, sounds like something that you have experienced, then you don't have income. You have a business, but you don't have income. So you have to think about whether or not you pay taxes or not. Scenario number 3. Basically, the seasonal business owner who you are deals with pandemics or natural disasters. I mean, we have gone through 2 to 3 years of we've dealt with pandemics globally. So this is really important to understand that, hey, listen, if you have not generated any income at the business level, you could be in situation number 3, scenario number 3. So you run a seasonal business, you are gearing up, ready to open shop for the season, and then bam, a natural disaster or pandemic, hits, and you are forced to stay closed for the season, which means what? You will not be able to open shop until the following fiscal year. That's scenario number 3. Scenario number 4, the business that's at the end of its journey, but is not officially closed yet. So some businesses begin the process of closing, but the business owner does not get around to cutting the final cord. So basically, operations wind down and the business closes, but not officially. Because when we talk about official closing, we're speaking about making sure that all the legal and regulatory and fiscal matters are taken care of. So if this sounds like you might have a fiscal year or 2 or 3 or 4 where your business has no income. So what I'm trying to say here is I'm trying to explain to you the 4 primary scenarios why you may have a business but no income. So it's important to understand the kind of scenario you'll find yourself into, because there are consequences for each scenario. There are some there are some fiscal implications depending on the scenario that you find yourself into. So whether you are just you just formed a business but you are procrastinating when it comes to opening, or you have multiple companies, you open a legit business, the business is actually there, but in terms of the business is operating, is incurring expenses, but the marketing efforts and the sales effort fall flat, or whether or not you have a seasonal business that has not opened for the season because there was some kind of a natural disaster or global pandemics. And scenario number 4 is just that your business is at the end of its operational life. You have maybe filed for chapter 11, whatever. You have actually decided to close shop, but you have not filed the legal and regulatory paperwork to actually close the shop itself officially. So those are the 4 scenarios I really want you to remember, because it will matter a lot when we actually continue the conversation today. Now let me talk to you about the approach. So obviously I've spoken to you about the reasons why you might not have income in a fiscal year. What about expenses? So regardless of your situation for not incurring revenue, you fall into one of the following categories. So you have no business expenses and no income. So that's the situation that we call neutrality. So basically no income, no expenses, nothing. So the business is not existence, operationally speaking. Okay, and the second scenario, the second option is you have business expenses but no income. So it's important. So this is actually it's the scenario where you have a business. You basically are running an active business, operationally speaking, everything is active, but basically you have more expenses than revenue, or you have no revenue at all. In other words, maybe because I was just talking to you about a seasonal business. If you run a business that is subject to seasonality, you basically have expenses, but if you don't have revenue during that season, if you don't operate during that specific season, then you actually are left with only expenses. Okay, so the category you fall into might influence whether or not you need to file a tax return with the IRS or not, and whether or not you have to file tax returns with state and county authorities. Okay, and depending on your business structure, it's really important. So the second thing I want you to pay attention to is your business structure. So the first thing is the scenario under which your business fall into. I've given you 4 scenarios, and the second criterion that you need to pay attention to is your business structure. Are you an LLC? Let me ask you a question. Big decision time, boss. Big decision time. Are you a limited liability company? Are you a sole proprietorship? Are you a limited liability partnership? Are you an S corporation? Are you a C corporation? So basically, you have 3 options. Whether you are a corporation, a partnership, or you are taxed as a disregarded entity. In other words, you are maybe a single member S corporation, you are a single member LLC, or you are a sole proprietorship. In those cases, the IRS will treat you as a disregarded entity, which means that you have to actually file whatever income or expenses that you have. You have to file it on Schedule C of your personal tax return. But the point I'm trying to make here is that, when it comes to expenses, you only have 2 scenarios. It's important to understand this criterion also. Now let's talk about the decision you have to make. So filing taxes for a small business with no income. Now we're going to dig deep into the whole subject. Okay, do you have to file business taxes if your business made no money? So this is the question you came here to answer, and we have answers. But your responsibilities for filing taxes for a small business with no income depends on your company structure. So I just talked about that, but now I'm going to dig a little deeper. Your company structures plays an important role. So the different types of company structure include sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation. Here we are speaking about C Corp and S Corp. And we have limited liability company. Now, this is the federal classification. It's the federal categorization. Now, there are some state categorizations also, but overall, those 4 primary categories are effective. So, for example, you can have a limited liability partnership, You can have a limited partnership. You can have a limited liability. You can have an LP or LP. But those will fall into the partnership category. So what I'm trying to say here is that the type of structure that you find yourself in will have a big, very, very big impact on whether or not you should file taxes, and whether or not you should file taxes with no revenue. It's important though to also think about your status for last year. What tax return did you file last year? What was your income last year? What was your taxes last year? What was your situation last year? This is important because the IRS is going to look at a pattern of taxability, what they call pattern of taxability. In other words, did you have the same situation last year, or this is your first year of having no revenue in the business? Because if you had a similar situation last year, that means that you, for example, you will not have to pay something called underpayment penalty, because your taxes, whatever you would have paid last year, would be sufficient to cover last year's tax liability, and the IRS will give you a pass for this year in terms of not charging you an underpayment penalty. So it's really important to look at into historical patterns here to understand what your situation was last year. So last year, did you file at all? And if you did file, what kind of a tax liabilities did you have? So those are quintessential questions that you need to answer. I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. We are still having a conversation about how to file business taxes with no income. So I first gave you the 4 primary scenarios that could happen and make you not have revenue at all. And I spoke to you about expenses. And I also explained to you that filing taxes for a small business with no income depends on your primary legal structure. Now let's dig into each specific legal structure, because maybe you are a sole proprietorship, maybe you're a partnership, maybe you're a corporation. So I want to break down for you what you need to do. Let's first start with sole proprietorship. So sole proprietorships are businesses owned by one person. So instead of filing a specific tax return, you simply fill out Schedule C, profit or loss from business, and attach it to your personal income tax return, Form 1040. This is why the IRS thinks of you as a disregarded entity. In other words, you're not really quote unquote an entity, you are the same person. Okay, so is it necessary to file Schedule C in a year with no income? Maybe. Let me break it down for you. During a year with no income and no expenses, you generally don't need to file Schedule C, but doing so might be a good idea, because when it comes to taxes, it's better to be safe than sorry. So if you plan on not filing a return, be absolutely sure that the IRS will not think that you should have. And you want to verify that you did not receive any non-income payments related to your business. This is very important, because if you had no income but had expenses, filing might also be a great idea. You might be wondering, can I deduct startup costs with no income? If you have no income but did have expenses, you may be eligible to receive a tax refund or credit by filing. Okay, so this is really good. So the bottom line is no income, no expenses. Filing Schedule C generally is not necessary. No income but expenses. Filing Schedule C can help you receive a refund or credit. So it is absolutely necessary and economically conducive, economically favorable to you to file if you have no income but you do have expenses. Very important to see the distinction here. Let's talk about partnership. So if you're a partnership, let's just break it down for you. So what is a partnership? So partnerships are businesses that are owned by 2 or more people. If you own a partnership, you must file Form 1065, U.S. Return of Partnership Income. And you need to distribute Schedule K1, partners' share of income, deductions, credits, etc. to partners. Okay? You might be thinking, but do I have to file business taxes if no income is earned? And that's a good question. Now, if you had no income and no expenses, you do not need to file the partnership tax return. Like sole proprietors, you want to verify that you don't have any hidden income or expenses that you forgot about before skipping your filing. Okay, it's important because the IRS the IRS might find out sooner or later, because when somebody makes a payment to you, that person by in terms of regulation might also need to send a proof of payment to the IRS. That's, for example, when we talk about the 1099 DIV for dividends or 1099 NEC for non-employee compensation, if the payer sends a copy of your 1099 NEC to the IRS and sends it to you also, and you forgot to actually mention that income, this could be problematic for you in the future if you get audited. So the thing here is that if you had no income but had expenses, you must file your information return. That way, the IRS knows about payments that could be treated as deductions or credits. So here is the bottom line. No income, no expenses, filing Form 1065 generally is not necessary. Let me repeat that. No income, no expenses, filing Form 1065 generally is not necessary. If you had no income, but you did have expenses, filing Form 1065 is necessary. And when we talk about filing Form 1065, we also are speaking about the ancillary Schedule K1. So you have to actually distribute the same Schedule K1 partners' shares of income, deductions, credits to all partners. Remember, this K1 is called partners' share of income, deductions, credits, blah, blah, blah. So it's not just the income. It's also the deductions of the expenses and so on and so forth. Let us talk about corporation. So this is a very interesting topic here, and I want you to pay attention. So a corporation, C Corp, is a business structure that is a separate legal entity from its owners. So the IRS considers this C Corp an entity, not a disregarded entity, but a real entity, because it has this sort of a segregation from the person owning the business. So corporation owners must file Form 1120 U.S. Corporation Income Tax Return. Corporations can also decide to form an S corporation. So S Corp owners must file Form 1120 S U.S. Income Tax Return for an S corporation. The thing you need to understand here is that both C and S Corps follow the same guidelines for filing taxes with no income. If you had no income, you must file the corporation income tax return regardless of whether you had expenses or not. Let me just say this again, because it's very important. Both C and S Corps follow the same guidelines for filing taxes with no income. If you had no income, you must file the corporation income tax return regardless of whether you had expenses or not. So here is the bottom line. No income, no expenses. Filing Form 1120 as is necessary. No income but expenses. Filing Form 1120 as is necessary. So this is really important. And remember, if you had, if there are some, let's say if there are some expenses or not expenses, whatever, you have to file for the form. The thing is that the IRS wants to keep track of your business, whether you had income or not, because corporations do operate at another level, and we have talked about net operating loss carry forwards and carry back and carry backs. So it's really important to pay attention to that. And one thing I want to talk also about it is that remember to file your Form 1120 or 1120S on time. So simply because you have no income doesn't mean that you have to be late. If you are late, you might incur some penalties. So your responsibilities remain the same. So here is a bonus for you. So let's just sort of recap the whole conversation so you have a clear idea of what we're talking about. So filing tax return with no income. I want you to look right now on the screen for this chart, because this chart that you currently have on the screen will help you determine your responsibilities. Okay, and we are going to go through things very clearly so you have a clear idea of where you stand. Okay, so you can see the business structure. And do you have to file a tax return with no expenses and no income? Do you have to file a tax return with expenses and no income? So let's first start with the sole proprietorship. Sole proprietorship, LLC, taxed as a sole proprietorship. So this is, for instance, if you have a single member LLC and you elect to be taxed as a sole proprietorship, this will apply to you. So do you have to file a tax return with no expenses and no income? Generally, no. Do you have to file a tax return with expenses and no income? Generally, no, but it can help you receive a refund or credit. This is why I have explained to you during this show that it's always good to file if you had expenses, because there is a possibility you can recoup some of those expenses. So this is advantageous to you, fiscally speaking. Let's talk about a business structure where you have a partnership or an LLC taxed as a partnership. Remember, as an LLC, you can elect to be taxed as a partnership. You can elect to be taxed as a corporation. You can elect to be taxed as a sole proprietorship. So if you are a partnership or an LLC taxed as a partnership, do you have to file a tax return with no expenses, no income? Generally, no, because basically there have been no activity. Okay, so do you have to file a tax return with expenses and no income? Yes, because again, the law wants you to file tax returns, and you might also have some net operating loss carry forwards to take advantage of in the future. The third scenario, you are a corporation or LLC taxed as a corporation. Do you have to file tax return with no expenses and no income? Yes. Do you have to file a tax return with expenses and no income? Yes. So the law for corporations is pretty clear. You have to file tax returns regardless of your situation. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. In today's conversation, I was speaking to you about how to file business taxes with no income. So I gave you an overview, the approach you need to follow, the decision you need to follow, and the bonus. Thank you. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.